Good morning to all. I'm Giliberto Capano, as you probably know, and I'm going to present the first result of a research we have been doing in the last couple of years on policy instruments mixes in governing higher education in comparative perspective. The main concern of this presentation and of this paper that we have presented a couple of 3 months ago in an international conference in Singapore is to try to understand how governance change in higher education in the last 25 years have really impacted on the performance of the related system. So our main concern is how governance shift impacts on systemic performance in higher education. This is the presentation index of the arguments I will going to offer to you. I will start with a short presentation of the theoretical framework on policy instruments. Then I will present to you our research design, then some descriptive statistics on the 12 cases, on the 11 cases we have analyzed. Then we will present the QCA, the qualitative comparative analysis, through which we have grasped the main combination of more effective policy instruments in determining systemic performance in the 11 countries we have analyzed. And then I will argue around some preliminary results and the future applicability of this first attempt to grasp policy mixes and their performance in higher education. These are the aims of our research. Our research is strongly committed to understand what governance shifts have been in different countries. Respect to the usual description that we have in terms of more or less market, more or less a hierarchy, this idea that there is a kind of convergence, at least in Western European countries, toward a common template called steering at the distance. Then, after the descriptive aim, which is exactly that to offer a detailed reconstruction of the content of this governance shift, we have an analytical aim that is that to operationalize the concept of policy mix to gauge the eventual relevant differences in terms of policy setting. And then we will try to explain how this specific operationalization of the substantial instruments could allow to find which kind of real combination of instruments leads to better performance. Regarding the theoretical framework, we have decided to unpack the concept of governance arrangement by focusing on its basic elements. A governance arrangement, a governance mode is substantially a set of policy instruments that is used to address the behavior of the target of the policy. According to the literature, we have chosen those families of substantial policy instruments that are bearer of different and possibly not overlapping capacities to induce behavior in recipients. So we have decided to focus on 4 specific families of substantial policy instruments, expenditure that is capable to induce remuneration, regulation that induce coercion, information that induce persuasion, and taxation that induce a mix of coercion and remuneration. And we assume that what is relevant is those kind of shapes of through which the substantial instrument is designed to deliver the expected result. Substantially, we think that we should focus not only on those four families of substantial instruments, but also on the ways through which these substantial instruments deliver directly or indirectly the inducement to the actor. Furthermore, we think that the set of the adopted policy instrument is the consequence of a diachronic accumulation. So it's time to analyze the full package of adopted policy instruments and not a single type of policy instrument, as very often happens in public policy. We have theorized that the expected effect, that is, the systemic policy performance, is assumed to depend on the combination of multiple instruments that for us are conditioned, and thus we are searching for a complex causality principle, which means that we can adopt that methodology called qualitative comparative analysis that is capable to grasp exactly a complex causality principle. So we are searching for combinatory causality. And we know, just to remind here, that unlike quantitative methods, QCA is capable to focus on combination of conditions rather than on singular variables. We know we will go through the use of fuzzy set QCA, and which is a specific way through which values are assigned between 0 to 1, and thus to a way through which we can describe the degree of membership of a given case in a particular set. Which is important in our decision to grasp QCA, and I want to underline this again, is exactly that, because we want to test which kind of set of policy instruments is more probable to deliver the best performance, systemic performance in higher education. Is important to have a method capable to grasp exactly this combinatory logic of causation. We have been working on 11 Western countries. You can see here the list of these countries. And we aspire to reach 15 countries, which means the full population of the 15 EU countries before enlargement. Thanks to this, we can cover all the historical types of university governance, at least in Europe. We have added also Norway, which is a quite interesting case. The time span of our empirical analysis is 25 years, which means the last quarter of century in which we perfectly know many changes have been introduced in the way to steer higher education systems. Then we have focused on the systemic performance. We have decided to test this first exercise on teaching, and we have taken as indicator of systemic performance the percentage of adult people between 30 and 34 years holding a tertiary degree in each country. We perfectly know that this way to operationalize systemic performance is quite disputable, but there is a point there should be a point of departure, a point of starting. So we have decided to choose the more simple indicator of systemic performance of higher education system, but at the same time one of the most relevant, at least in Europe, but not only in Europe, because we perfectly know that all the governments per reforms have been pushed by the political goal to increase the quality of the human capital in each country. How we have collected data, substantially we have broken down every single piece of legislation and we have coded it. It has been an incredible and tiring work. You can imagine that we have hundreds and hundreds of national legislation, of pieces of national legislation and national regulation. At the end of the story, I can show you some descriptive statistics. You can see the distribution here of regulation, expenditure, taxation, information for each of the 11 countries. Here you can have a look to the most utilized regulatory instruments. As you can see, the regulation of content of curricula, the opportunities given to university has been the most utilized, together with the opportunities given to institutional governance. Then you can have a look to the other most used shapes of policy instruments. Regarding the expenditure shapes, you can see that grants and performance-based institutional funding has been the more used. Regarding the fees, we have an interesting mix, and regarding the information tools, we can see that the shapes of monitoring, reporting and transparency have been the most used. Okay, after the descriptive statistic, it's the time to go deep in our QCA treatment. We had 11 national cases with dozens and dozens of different potential combinations, so huge problems of limited diversity for QCA. So we needed to recur to a dense theoretical reflection in order to make a hypothesis to the best combination to be tested. We found out 6 combinations and we have run QCA on them, do a dense calibration of a condition of outcome. We did the analysis of necessity of relations, the empirical test of sufficiency, set relation, and so on. At the end of the story, we decided to exclude all the combinations with the combination of condition showing a rate consistency lower than 0.76, and here in red you can find the intermediate solutions. These intermediate solutions found 2 different analytical solutions. The first is R7, R15 in the absence of T2, which means institutional opportunities in choosing students, institutional opportunities in choosing the content of the curricula in absence of income-based fees. The other solution is E3 plus T2, which means target funding plus income-based fees in absence of R7, R15. The intermediate solution, which is the best solution according to our QCA, is well represented here, where we found that the best combination of instruments works according to our analysis respect to the indicator of systemic performance on teaching on 7 countries out of the 11 we have chosen, and you can see that the green solution works in 5 countries: Denmark, Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands and Norway, while the yellow solution works on England and Ireland. What is quite interesting from our point of view is to underline that in the countries of the green solution, this mix of instruments has deal with big governmental reforms through which government have tried to increase the institutional autonomy of universities, while in the yellow solution we have an historical presence of institutional autonomy for universities. At the end of the story, the main finding of this solution are the following one. The consistency value of the intermediate solution is very good, is 0.87, and also the coverage, which means the country covered, is quite good, 0.82, so we don't have contradictory cases or deviant cases for coverage, and this is an absolutely relevant thing according to the QCA situation, the QCA addresses. We have 3 typical cases: Norway, England and Ireland, 5 deviant cases for consistency in degree: Denmark, Sweden, Finland and the Netherlands, and 4 cases, the Southern European cases, that are not good example of solution formulas and neither for the outcome, and so they do not deserve any relevant attention. What are the main findings? First of all, the different combination of financial and regulatory policy instruments are relevant for increasing higher education system teaching performance, that more autonomy for university and targeted funding matters, but according to different historical tradition in higher education, configuration of policy instruments that has resulted more effective in pushing towards the increasing of 30-34 years old tertiary degree holders was in countries characterized by an accountable higher institutional autonomy, like England and Ireland. Other countries where in the last 2 decades consistent changes in the institutional governance of university have been introduced by government to give more institutional autonomy are considered. This raises a relevant question of the effectiveness of those institutional governance reforms introduced in Portugal, France and Italy, because we perfectly know that also in Portugal, France and Italy we had strong reforms in institutional governance, like in Northern European countries, but it seems that something went wrong, which means that probably not the proper policy instruments have been adopted to really strengthen the role of institutional autonomy in these countries. To briefly conclude, the evaluative literature on higher education performance should find a third way between variable-oriented research strategy and description of case studies. We think that the national path in translating the common template of studying at the distance model by focusing on some instruments rather than others, And very often, though the adopted set of instruments is large, only a small combination of them are really impacting on the outcome. So we think really that there are possible paths for further research starting from our approach. For example, to increase the coverage of cases and include countries belonging to other continents, and focusing on rules through which decisional powers and competencies are attributed and accountability rules are fixed when shapes are designed. Hi, just to finish, not only to say ciao to all of you, just to personally and physically underline a couple of things. First, my apologies for the really dense presentation, but in 20 minutes is not simple. If you want to read the couple of papers we have written right now on our research, there is no problem, we can send them to Alejandro. The last thought is to underline that our effort is committed to show that when we speak about governance shift, governance change, we should be more precise. We should try to understand and to explain how really governance changes impact on the performance. Otherwise, we spend too much time in describing the different changes in the actors, in the powers over time, without giving the real sense of the effects of the adopted changes. And I think that is quite bad when we think to our competitors, those scholars, especially in economics, or those social scientists working from a quantitative point of view, which means by analyzing large number of cases, very often propose quite simple explanations that are bearer of very, very, very problematic solutions from the policy maker's point of view, I think. So we should be conscious of the fact that we need to analyze more cases at the same time, and we need to focus not only on general principle, more market, less market, more hierarchy and so on. We should focus on the real way through which governance impact on the reality of policy making, and the real way is through different combination of policy instruments. It's done for me now. It's been a real pleasure. My apologies again and not the chance to directly present our ideas to you. I really hope there will be another occasion to meet physically to discuss about the topic of our interest. Ciao ciao.